Hello fellow bike people! I recently posted a video about my thoughts on how to ride your bike safely in the current climate. I talked about the importance of social distancing when riding, where the best places to ride are, and a few other topics. But the main point of the video was that cyclists have an advantage during the pandemic because we have both a method of transportation and a method of recreation that keeps us socially distanced. There are a ton of reasons to start riding right now. There's all the usual cliche benefits like helping the environment and helping with fitness and all that, but the coronavirus pandemic has caused a whole other slew of reasons to get on your bike. Now that countries are starting to reopen, we're starting to see the long-term effect that the virus is going to have on day-to-day life. For example, just here in Canada, we're seeing major industries like oil and food supply struggling, our public transportation systems are a total mess, and a lot of people are struggling to pay their rent regardless of what programs the government has put in place to help. And that's just to name a few things off the top of my head. I really can't think of anyone who hasn't been affected by this virus. At the risk of sounding preachy here, bicycles can solve or at least help mitigate the effects of a lot of these problems regarding transportation. I know a lot of Canadians can't really get as far as they need to go by bike, but for the lucky few that can, it might be the perfect time to sell the car. For those that don't have cars and live in metropolitan areas, public transit is really scary right now, and we don't know what state the buses and trains and subways and all that will be in once it's safer to use them because they're all in serious financial crisis right now. Again, cycling can be a really good option because it can get you to work or get you where you need to go while keeping you away from other people. Another thing to think about is the mental health benefits of cycling right now. In Ontario, a lot of parks and recreational facilities are scheduled to reopen soon, but that's got to focus on individual activities. Unfortunately, a lot of the world's most popular sports are team sports that require a lot of players in a semi-enclosed area, so they're not going to be possible for quite a while. I'm not really educated enough about mental health to say much here, but people are social animals and sports are kind of built into the way we socialize these days. Without the chosen sport or recreational activity, people are getting stressed. And that's without even mentioning people who don't really like sports in the first place but need a good reason to leave the house. Cycling is unlike any other sport in that it's completely open-ended and it can be anything to anyone. When I say cycling, I bet most people picture the traditional curvy handlebar, skinny tired road bike and think about the Tour de France. Yes, that is the most traditional style of bicycle racing, but there are a ton of other options, and get this, cycling doesn't have to involve racing or competition of any sort. In my mind, you don't have to do anything too difficult or serious with the bike to be considered a cyclist. I think anyone who chooses to ride a bike for any reason when they have alternatives can consider themselves to be a cyclist. At the moment, racing and club rides and group rides are all basically off the table anyways, so it's the perfect time to get into casual individual riding. To get started in riding, you really don't need much. A bicycle is all you need. It doesn't have to be any specific bicycle, just a bicycle. A helmet is strongly recommended and it's mandatory in some countries. But other than that, equipment like specialty clothing and upgrades can be purchased later if you find you need them, but you don't need them to start out. As for what kind of bike you need, there's a world of options and really no wrong choices. I often say there's no such thing as a bad bike, meaning every bicycle has its place and its purpose, even cheap ones and ones from department stores. That said, you get what you pay for, so it's important to do a little bit of research to make sure you don't get a bike that's more trouble than it's worth. If you have an old bike in storage, or you have one that you can get your hands on for free, putting an old bike to use is the perfect way to get into this because it's zero investment. Bike shops are the traditional way of buying new bicycles, and they all deserve a lot of support, especially the smaller family-owned ones. The main benefit to buying at a bike shop is specialty knowledge and the fact that they act as a service center and they can keep your bike running like new for as long as possible. The downside to bike shops is it is one of the more expensive ways to buy a bicycle, and social distancing rules are making them a bit less accessible than they used to be. You could order a bike online or get one from a big box store, but these are often a bit lower quality than bike shop brands, and they don't have that skilled assembly behind them, which is important to make sure the bike keeps working long term. What I would recommend for buying a good bike on a budget is to look at your local used classifieds, so Kijiji, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, Letgo, things like that. If you're not familiar with brand names, I have 2 tricks that should point you in the right direction and make sure the bike you're looking at is at least decent quality. The first thing is see if you can find reviews or spec lists of the exact make, model, trim level, and color of the bike that you're looking at online. If it seems like it's impossible to find the bike or it doesn't seem like it exists, it may well be a generic no-name bike that just has a generic label slapped on it and it's probably lower quality. If you can find exact information on the bike you're looking at, there's a good chance that the company put a lot of effort into designing it and wants you to know the details, meaning it's probably a better quality bicycle. The second trick is to look up your local bike shop and see what brands they sell. The first benefit to this is obviously if a bike shop sells it, it's probably a decent quality brand. The other benefit is, let's say your local bike shop is a Specialized dealer, and somebody in your area has a Specialized bike for sale, and you want to buy it. There's a good chance that that bike came from your local bike shop, so you can bring it to that bike shop and they can service the bike properly and they can give you specific information on it as you need. When it comes to what style of bike you want, the main thing to consider is where you want to ride the bike and what you want to do with the bike. Example time. If you want to ride your bike on your local trails, you'll obviously need some sort of off-road bike. First thought then would be a mountain bike, but let's say your local trail is a rail trail or something that's mostly flat and not many turns. Mountain bikes are designed to be fairly rugged, but that means a sacrifice in efficiency and comfort in some ways. For a rail trail, a hybrid style bike with more off-road features would probably be a better bet than a mountain bike. You get the idea. The industry can be a little confusing when it comes to bicycle categories. Each brand is free to define their own lineup in their own way, and there's a lot of overlap that doesn't really seem like it makes sense sometimes. These aren't technical terms, but I want to try and simplify it by dividing the bikes into 5 categories. Excluding niche categories like BMX and fat bikes, that would be drop bar, road hybrid, comfort hybrid, trail hybrid, and mountain bikes. Each category is obviously gonna have subcategories and some overlap, but most bikes should fit into one of these categories. Drop bar refers to bikes that look like the traditional Tour de France curved handlebar skinny tire bikes, and it includes categories like cyclocross and touring and gravel and a few others as well on top of the classic race bikes. These bikes are what most people would traditionally imagine when you say bicycle. Bikes with drop bars can be designed for any number of applications, including off-road. But what they have in common is an emphasis on speed and pedaling efficiency. These bikes put the rider in a pretty strenuous position sometimes, and I jokingly say you have to assume the position to ride these things, so they're not always great for casual riders. These bikes would be best if you plan to join clubs or a race team or charity rides after the pandemic is over. Road hybrid refers to any bike that maintains the slimmer tires and the lightweight build elements of a drop bar bike, but with a flat or straight handlebar for a more upright riding position and more general use comfort. These bikes are ideal for commuting or fitness-oriented riding. Comfort hybrid is a very broad category that's going to cover things like upright hybrids with skinny tires, all the way to old 1950s style Schwinn beach cruisers. The features of these bikes are wide comfy seats, upright riding positions, sometimes low entry, and the ability to mount racks and accessories to them really easily. These bikes are great for shorter commutes, for grocery getting, for family rides, or just casual cruises around the neighborhood. Trail hybrid refers to bikes that are pretty similar to the road hybrid bikes, but they're more designed for off-road use and have slightly more rugged parts like disc brakes and suspension forks and tires with deeper tread. These bikes are often designed to be good for a little bit of everything in basically all conditions. They're great in bad weather, they can handle light trails, they're pretty fast, and they're more upright and comfortable than a mountain bike. These bikes can get kind of a bad rap for being jack of all trades but master of none, but they're really capable these days with modern designs, and I feel like they're an ideal choice for most new cyclists. Mountain bikes are the exact opposite of drop bar bikes. There are tons of categories and price points, all the way from base models all the way up to fancy full carbon fiber, full suspension models. For new riders, I would generally recommend a hardtail bike, meaning front suspension only. Rear suspension not only raises the price of the bike, but it also takes a lot of maintenance to keep it running properly if it's high end, and if it's low end, it's gonna develop a lot of problems real fast. This is especially prevalent on used full suspension bikes, which a lot of the time from my experience are being sold because the rear end has been so badly maintained that it's not really worth fixing anymore. I recommend mid-priced aluminum hardtail frames from good brands with features like disc brakes and brand name suspension and good quality gear sets. The choice of exact style can lean from cross-country or XC bike, which feature short travel suspension and more steep angles with an emphasis on climbing efficiency, to all-mountain or descending focused bikes with heavier duty parts and more slacked out geometry. If you're just getting into riding, there's really no point second-guessing your choice once you've picked a bike. Modern bikes are extremely capable and most of the parts are modular, so you can change and modify the bike to suit you as you need. If your bike develops problems, bike shops can help, but this is the perfect time to crack out your tools, find a YouTube video, and teach yourself how to fix your bike. Most repairs can be done with basic metric tools, and if you make a mistake on a cheap used bike, it was used, so no skin off your back anyways. I'll post a link to my last video with tips for riding safely during the pandemic, and I strongly recommend doing as much research as possible on the exact social distancing regulations in your area before you go out for a ride. Other than that, cycling is a fairly natural and intuitive activity, so just stay confident and you'll get the best out of it. The cycling community is generally very welcoming, and every cyclist I know can't resist talking about bikes, so don't be afraid to reach out and ask other riders for information. Stay safe out there, everyone.